Alright, Diablo 4 players, Season 8, the bad parts. What are the things that we definitely want to see them improve, as this is a constructive criticism video, because I actually really care about Diablo 4, probably like yourself, and we want the game to be good. Heck, I just made a video going over all of the good things, but I also want to go over a lot of the bad things, and it is very, very important in Season 8. The reason why is a lot of players are saying that they are quitting the game. I see this all the time across lots of different Diablo content creators' comments. People are saying, if it's too hard, guess what? I'm going to be quitting the game. There's so many of these that have tons of upvotes. They're talking about they're nerfing all of the classes. They're making the game harder. They're giving you less loot. This person says equals players quit. And I see this across a lot of other people's videos saying that they hate getting one-shotted. The bosses will absolutely one-shot you in Season 8. Even if you are kitted out, you got materials, got GAs on it, it doesn't matter. You're going to get one-shotted with some of these. And this person is saying that casual players are the heart of Diablo. I'd actually argue that that's probably true with all video games. And they even said that they only had about 50% of the players actually even reach the highest Torment difficulty, and now it's going to be even less. So let's talk about it. So there's another person over here saying that they're going to be quitting. This is the big issue right here, is class balance. I'm going to go ahead and go over a list of some of like the top things that I think are a priority for Blizzard to actually fix. Keep in mind, they wanted our feedback, so this is kind of the video that's going to go over the discussion of what needs to be kind of addressed here. But this is a big issue with specifically Season 8. If you're not playing top tier absolute meta builds, you're absolutely not going to be able to do a lot of the content. Like some of the builds that would be able to do T4 in the previous season, you're not going to be able to do it. Heck, you're not going to be even leveling up your glyphs to even 65 with some of these builds. And this person put it pretty good over here. The casual dad with a family 9-to-5 job doesn't think grinding is fun, logs in the game when he can to have a good time. And the thing is he might not have a good time, especially again when you look at the one-shotting that is going to happen with these brand new bosses. Now, I actually think it's kind of cool that we have some challenging new forms of content, but I've never really liked getting one-shot into any video game, but there are going to be mechanics where you have to learn the boss fight. If you do not learn the boss fight in Season 8, you cannot kill the boss. These are very, very challenging. Now, there are going to be builds like the one that you're seeing right here that can just one-shot the boss. Now, they said that they didn't want players to be able to do that, and I totally think that that is kind of reasonable. Like, if you build a giant boss and it's got all these mechanics, and the player goes up and goes, you're dead. Like, it kind of makes the game look like that something is broken. But there's a huge difference between a meta build and something that is like a fun or casual, or I just kind of threw it together with some like scrap gear. That kind of stuff will not work at all. And another thing I really wanted them to fix is a lot of these mythic uniques. They are so bad. Like Melted Heart of Slig sees zero play in Endgame. There are so many other ones like the Spear, and a lot of other mythics just don't see play in the game, and that's because, well, they're just simply not good. But I wanted to go ahead and mention some of the things that Blizzard is actually doing that they talked about on their campfire, and how some of this stuff kind of backfires. So basically they mentioned that players were getting too many legendaries, and I honestly want to say that once you're at World Tier 4, you get too many legendaries that feel trash, right? If it's not a greater affix, a lot of times you don't even look at the item, especially because you want to get your aspects leveled up, right? You want to get those max rolled ones. And people were complaining about it, so then in the later season, well, they decided to go ahead and make the greater affix ones roll a little higher, which is a good thing. But then in Season 8, they give us less loot. So if we get less loot, then we still have kind of the same problem of like, well, I can't max out my aspects. It just takes too dang long. And then we're also talking about leveling, because I'm going to mention XP in this video. It's very hard to get to Paragon 300. And you might say, well, you only really need like Paragon 200, 220, and even 250, and then you're pretty much done. And I would say, yeah, most builds are kind of like that. However, this season, in Season 8, your boss powers actually scale with your Paragon, which is very important because your whole build next season is going to be based off of these new boss powers, which I know this video is mainly talking about the bad, but I think some of the boss powers are actually quite cool and let you kind of scale into other things. But they're really talking about like leveling here, and they were showing off that like, well, we're going to be cutting the XP in about half, right? Because they were saying the time from Season 7 was to level 60 was about 9 hours, and then in Season 6, it was about 15 to 17, so it took a lot longer, right? Now, I'm going to be real with you guys. I leveled up on the PTR, and it was really not that bad, even though it seems like it's doubled over here. The people that are blasters, right? The people that watch YouTube video guides of like the best top tier builds, most players will not really have a big issue with this. Instead of maybe, let's say, like 2 to 3 hours, maybe it can take, you know, a couple additional hours, like maybe 2 extra hours or an hour extra, depending on what build that you're playing. Because the difference between like a Dance of Knives rogue and like a barbarian build that is kind of just walking through stuff, it's going to take a lot longer, right? And that's normal for any action RPG. I don't think that this is a big thing that they need to kind of be looking at to rework. I think that the leveling was fine in Season 7 because everyone just wants to get to the endgame ASAP. But as far as like these new layer keys, this is something that I do want to talk about. If you like to play in groups, this is going to be a very big thing in Season 8 where you no longer are going to be able to share your materials because these bosses are going to be much harder. So it's going to be harder for like one person just to carry, but on top of that, everyone has to put in their own boss materials for the boss. And I'll go to some extra gameplay so you guys can see some variety in builds here. But these seasonal powers are actually cool. However, there's one big downside, is that all of the cool boss powers, which are pretty much the red ones, you do not get to access these until you defeat either the world boss, which, you know, you don't really have control over that, but when it does happen, okay, you go to the world boss. But all of the really good powers are basically from any of the tormented bosses. So you're going to have to get to that point where you can actually defeat those bosses, which, I'll be honest, they're much harder, so it's going to take so long, to the point where you also made the XP a lot harder to get to, especially for the, again, casual gamer dad that, you know, you have a job, you cannot play 30 hours a day, and they don't know how to level up within, like, you know, 5 hours getting, you know, everything pretty much maxed out. Most of the Diablo players, I would say, that play this game consistently, it only takes, you know, a weekend to max out your character and complete everything. And I think their idea and mindset was to kind of slow things down, get the retention rate for players to stick around and play a little bit longer. And I think that they could have actually added more content to keep players around versus slowing everything down, giving us less loot, less XP, and making things take longer because they are going to be harder. But they also mentioned here, and I was really interested to see that only 50% of players even hit Tormented 4. So they're making it way harder, and I think their goal was about like 10% of players to even hit the new difficulty of Torment 4. Remember, it's going to get way harder, and it's specifically with the like not top tier Omega builds that you probably copied from another content creator, which is fine. I don't really mind if people copy other people's builds or anything like that. I'm just telling you guys that if you are not someone that's really familiar with, you know, making a build and usually go to a content creator, that's great. You're going to be probably a-okay for Tormented 4 content. Now, if you're like, I want to do Pit 100, you absolutely need to be grinding in the next season because, well, a lot of builds won't reach there unless, of course, you're able to get all of your powers up, and it's still pretty hard to even do Pit 100. But they're also adjusting the tormented scaling of the pit, so it's going to be way harder overall. I believe, shouts to Rob, he did the like calculation, and the pit is going to be 73x harder if you want to do the max difficulty pit, which they even said themselves that they're not intended for anyone to even hit Pit 150, so like what's the point of doing the new pit? So here's my top 10 plus of the worst things in Season 8 for feedback. So the first thing that I wanted to go over is specifically the Pit 100 being like impossible for a lot of builds. And I straight up mean it is impossible. Even if you have Paragon 300, you have maxed out level 100 glyphs on the PTR. There are so many classes and so many builds that will not be able to do this, even Pit 100. The reason why 100 is important is that's where your glyphs max out. So if your goal is to try to be able to get enough power, you can't even get enough power because the pit limits you, because it's so much harder to actually get your glyphs up. So hopefully they can adjust this. There's also another adjustment change that they mentioned, which was talking about yellow and blue items, trying to add another affix to them to make them, you know, more viable, so there's a sense of progression. It does not matter at all. Within the first like hour or two, everything's going to be legendary. This does nothing for the game. I really like how in Path of Exile and other action RPGs, heck, Diablo 2 even, you can use blue items, you can use rare items. They could be the best in slot for very specific builds, but there is no point of these items in Diablo 4. Even while leveling, they just become useless so dang fast. Within, again, an hour of playtime, I would say within like the third hour, pretty much everyone's gonna have maxed out legendaries, but it depends on, you know, your luck. But for the most part, within like 2 hours, I was already maxed out, even with the newest update and testing on the PTR. I did not look for yellows or blues to have these certain affixes. It was kind of like, oh, it's an upgrade, just has a higher item power. And I think this is a pretty big issue in the game, which we'll talk more about as far as loot goes. There is less loot, which I already kind of talked about, which also means less high rolled aspects. Because again, my idea and philosophy is, okay, we should just have a loot filter that would kind of solve the issues with like, oh, there's just too much like garbage on the ground, right? We just want to see the items that we need. I have no idea why Diablo's like, yeah, we're looking at feedback. Oh, you guys want a loot filter? It's like kind of like they repeat this thing again and again. And as a Diablo partner, I really want them to just say, hey, we hear you want a loot filter. We're going to be adding it. It's going to take us some time. That's all I want to know. Not just like, we'll look into it. We'll see if people want it. An action RPG, a modern action RPG, and I look at Diablo and Path of Exile as like the kings of action RPG, a loot filter is a very basic feature that should be in your video game. It's if any action RPG comes out and it does not have a loot filter, I kind of question, do you play action RPGs? A loot filter is absolutely critical in an action RPG when, you know, a bunch of things are dropping. I get it, back in the day we didn't like, you know, have these sort of like issues with action RPGs, but nowadays it's just kind of seen as like, why don't you have it in your game? So hopefully we can get a loot filter to kind of solve this issue. But another thing that would solve this issue is just making everything in World Tier 4 just be GA. At least one GA. That way it's not like these legendaries drop that has a giant beam and it's just like, oh, it's just garbage. Non-GA, right? So I want to say that if they're making the next World Tier harder, right? They're making Tormented 4 way harder, give us better loot. You can give us less loot, but all of it is like quality. So if you want to solve the issue of like, if for whatever reason they just don't want to add a loot filter, because that's kind of how I feel at this point, is that just make it so when you go up in tiers, all of the loot is like equivalent to what you would actually want. So it's not garbage, right? You're not sifting through sand, as I think the term Colin used that was talking about it on the campfire. But as far as the less XP goes, I want to say that it's not that bad, to be honest, for streamers in terms of the XP ratio. But I want to say, again, casuals run any video game. There's more casual people than competitive players. And they said only 50% of people even make it to Tormented 4 already. And now it's going to be even less. So if you're making it harder to gain that XP to even transition into the World Tier 4, Tormented 4, it's going to cut down on the player base. And I think that a lot of people have been very vocal about this, saying that they're just going to quit. You get less XP, less loot, everything's way harder. Why would you want to, you know, go back into the game where everything is way harder and you get less stuff in a new season? I think the power creep has gotten faster and faster in this game, and that they're trying to kind of slow it down. And instead of making it so you're getting less stuff overall, I think their game design should have just added the next world tier. Like we have World Tier 5. This could be the super hard and the brand new thing. Not just going and saying, well, we're just going to nerf everything so that you do the same thing, but you get less. That doesn't make sense in terms of getting players excited. If you just called it literally World Tier 5, I think people would be like, okay, you know, not everyone can do this. It's going to be super hard content. I totally respect it. You know, it's just brand new. Versus, again, calling it the same world tier and giving us less just seems like backwards. It seems like it's harder to get excited about it versus, again, just a new world tier. This is the one big thing. If you do not have a massive scalar and boss powers, you are omega nerfed. And what I mean by this is that, like, there are certain classes like the rogue where you can get damage to close, which can scale the boss powers. Whereas druid kind of lacks like something to scale. Like with Sorc, you get this like damage to burn, right? And there's a few classes like the Spiritborn also can get like this scaling with like poison. If you don't happen to have that in your build, it is very, very rough to actually play the new season, especially if you want to actually do the new content. The difference between, like, you know, one-shotting a boss and having an ultimate boss fight that lasts 10 minutes is very, very massive. But the other thing that I think is really strange that got nerfed over here is the ultimates. They got a max cap. They capped the damage at 200x, which, you know, you could still play like Bloodwave, but if you look at other builds like Soul Rift that like also nerfed like the other things that would give you overpower and stuff like that, the ultimate builds that were finally good, right? Because Diablo has had this issue pretty much up until the current season, Season 7, where, like, Ultimates just straight up suck. Like, there was a few classes that would play an Ultimate, like, you know, Wrath of the Berserker, that would give you this massive damage for, like, a brief time, or, like, it would give you some sort of, like, multiplier, right? They were always either that or people just didn't play them, right? Like, there was kind of like the Death Trap build that kind of finally emerged, but for like a long time, a lot of builds did not play a lot of the ultimate skills, and they finally became good right now in Season 7, like the Cataclysm Druid. Again, Bloodwave is kind of an exception here because that one's still technically good, but then they're nerfing all of them, but then also they introduced this like Army of the Dead, Blade of Zir, like boss item, and it sucks. Like, it just straight up doesn't make sense that they're like, we finally got ultimates in a good spot. You can make a build all about the ultimate, and then they're like, oh, okay, well, sorry, it's dead. Like, I feel like when they nerf things in Diablo, just in general, it's just like way too hard. It's either like super broken, one-shotting everything on the screen, or it does 0 damage and it's just a tickle monster. So I think that they need to look at like the balance of this game. When they want to nerf something, you just tone it down a little bit. Don't just go to delete the build, just instantly. You just send it to the recycle bin. That's how I feel their balance like design is currently in the state of the game. Anyways, next up, tempering masterworking. I've heard a lot of complaints about this, and I totally feel you guys on it. It's not fun to have like a slot machine mechanic where it's like you just throw it in. You have no control. There's no skill. There's no like things that you can do to manipulate it, and you can still brick like, you know, multiple GA items. I know that you can like, you have the scroll that can reset, but you can only do that one time. I think that to alleviate some of the pressure, and I've mentioned this several times, is getting checkpoints. So when you go from 0 to 4, that's one checkpoint, and you can reset instead of going to like from 4 to 8, and then once you're at 8, if you want to reset, you don't have to go all the way back to 0. That would be some sort of way, but I just think honestly the easier way is just to select what thing that you want. I don't know if any played DA, but on Dragon Age, you can just like throw the imprint on it. You can just throw anything on it. It's like, it's really nice and smooth. Whereas Diablo it's just too random, and I think a lot of players get frustrated with this. It's specifically when you need to like hit triple masterworking on things. That's a nightmare. But also tempering, the difference between like a low and a high roll, especially if you masterwork it, can be a pretty big difference between getting like 100% chance to do double damage versus like 60%, right? So I want to say that they could look at this if they want to, but this is just a complaint that I've seen consistently. But if you don't have any sacrifice with your weapon, like it can't brick, then I think some people won't get as excited when they do hit that good one, because that's what makes it feel good, because, well, if you don't get it, there's some pain, right? So there could be some sort of, rework on it a little bit to make it a little bit more friendly, especially for a gamer dad that, just wants to chill out and doesn't want to have to farm Obdusite for like, 10 hours just to maybe get that masterworking, triple critted on his Harlequin, for the cooldown reduction. I mentioned this already, but like, lots of the mythics are still kind of trash in the game. And then like, these are your ultimate items. These are the items that people like think about, like, wow, dude, I want to get them. I never found the mythic farming to be fun. After Season 2, I really, to be honest with you guys, I hate farming the mythics. I think it is an absolute pain to sit there and be like, okay, all right, did I get it? Oh, didn't get it again. Okay, let's go again. Oh, I didn't get it again. It's just not that fun, at least for me to farm the mythics. But then you finally get the mythic and you're like, oh, what is it? Oh, it's melted hardest lid for the 10th time. And like, again, that's not exciting. I know you can still get a spark off of it, but I still don't think that is what I would consider ideal in terms of farming. Anyways, the other thing I want to talk about is that you must play meta. Fun builds, yeah, you can't even level up your glyph span. It is terrible for some of the more casuals. And this is what's going to really kind of, I would say, make people want to quit the game. So I would say let all of us at least get our glyphs to 65. Because again, some of the more casual fun players, the fun builds, it's just going to be really rough for you guys. Another thing I want to mention that I think is really bad in general is that nothing matters until greater affix for your items in terms of progression. Like when I look at the design of like Path of Exile or any other act RPG, heck, even D2, like you can get items, you don't have to be in the hardest difficulty to get those items, right? You can level up in PoE, a Divine Orb can drop when you're playing the campaign, an Exalted Orb can drop, and you could use these to kind of not only modify your items, but also you got it like, oh man, I got a Divine Orb, I'm really excited, I can go trade this and my whole build's done, whatever. You can get excited. But I've kind of looked at Diablo 4, I'm like, well, nothing matters until you get to the difficulty Torment, so you can actually get those GAs, because until GA, everything is bad. The best way I can like kind of put this into perspective is if you are, let's say, opening up Pokemon packs or packs of cards or whatever, and you know that in that pack there can never be anything good, you won't get excited about killing any of the monsters in the game because there's nothing that can drop that is going to be endgame viable. It's just like, I just got to get to the next one. You have to get to Torment before the GAs drop, because without GAs, you get nothing in terms of like best in slot. It is impossible. You can't even get an item, you can't get an Exalted Orb, a Divine Orb to trade than getting your best thing, right? So I think that they need to make sure that like we can get things that are good. Heck, you can play Diablo 2, and earlier on you can get an SOJ, right? People do, Andy runs in, Nightmare difficulty. You don't have to get to the highest one, and I feel like because it requires you to get to Torment, like hardest like tier, well technically it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, but you have to get there in order for anything good to actually matter. So your progression up to that point, the players kind of just zombieing playing until they can get to that point. So hopefully that kind of makes some sense. Anyways, I mentioned this also. This is going to really hurt the casuals. Again, there's a lot of stuff here that I feel like is like very hostile towards casual players. And if they already said only 50% of the players even make it to T4, it's going to be night and day difference. They wanted, I guess, only 10% to hit it in this season for Season 8. And if you put less and less players to be able to get to the end game, then again, your game dies, in my personal opinion, faster. You have less people trading, you have less people trading. It's like, oh, it's too hard to get items. People never respond and trade, which we'll talk about in a second anyways. But as far as sharing boss materials, I think that this is quite annoying that everyone has to put in their materials. It's kind of a double-edged sword, because sometimes it's annoying when people just want to leech, and like, if you use the party finder, there are going to be times where people like, they don't have materials, and they're like, hey dude, we're doing Durio runs, anyone want to join? And you join with your materials, and they don't have materials, and it's kind of like, they're just straight up leeching, right? And the next thing I want to talk about is all of the powers are at the end of the game too, which almost ties into like nothing matters till you get to Torment, right? So if you want to get the boss powers that actually matter, that make the season fun, that give you, well, I don't know if you can see it, but like there's a little poison that kind of shoots out. We're all based off of boss powers in the new season, which I think is kind of cool. But you don't get access to those powers until the end of the game. So you have to kill like the Uber Lilith, you have to kill the Uber Belial to get the brand new powers, which is kind of cool. But at the same time, when we look at progression, if they're slowing everything down and you don't get the cool seasonal stuff until the end, it makes it so it's harder to progress anyways. And I think some players may leave before they get the powers because they're just like, dude, it just takes too long, man. And that's just straight up how I feel about it. Whereas in Season 7, in the current state, you can get those Witchcraft powers, you can get that little poison AoE circle, and you can kind of just blast through content, and it feels good. You get the little toad that eats things. It's just these fun things that you get to kind of play around with that actually feel pretty dang strong in terms of progression, because you start leveling them up and become good. Now, you also have to level up these powers, but the thing is that you don't access these till so far in the progression that, again, I think a lot of people may just dip out one. And I think that this is the biggest one over here, which is number 13, which is like, there's no new end game, but the boss powers that drop, this, like, there is the new boss, like, kind of ladder. Like, you have a new boss to fight, which, you know, we showed off gameplay, we can one-shot it in like a second here. But the brand new bosses are cool. I think that that's awesome that they're adding new bosses. And another thing that's cool, even though this video is all about the things that I want them to fix, is that basically these brand new bosses, not only do we have the new bosses, but also some of the other bosses that we've had previously, like Durio, they do have new mechanics, and they've kind of been reworked in some sort of a way. And they are much more challenging too. But the thing is just like, okay, cool, I got the boss power. What am I going to do with it? Well, you just go back to the pit. I feel like this area over here is kind of where the endgame is just like, just the pit. Like, we need newer forms of endgame content. When we look at other action RPGs, there's just a lot more to do. Like, you know, I always refer back to PoE, and there's so many different things to do. Like, you can kind of choose your own endgame, whereas Diablo, it's like, well, Nightmare Dungeons were originally supposed to be part of the endgame, and there were these modifiers, but those got completely neutered. But I don't even think that that's really necessarily a bad thing. I just think that we should have more forms of endgame content, whether that there is like the Abattoir of Zir or other little, like, you know, like we had in Season 3 with the Seneschal's little like pet, where we had like these trap rooms, right? I don't know why we're kind of removing content, but I always think that there should be more things to do for the end game than simply just the pit again and again and again. Like, that's pretty much all you do. There's no real incentives to do PvP, or like there's not really incentives to do the gauntlet, because like you have to wait for a long time to claim your reward. There's a lot of things where I just feel like with these new boss powers, it'd be cool to fight something brand new. Maybe they can add some of the areas in the campaign, like in Hell, like that would be really cool to have like a new area that is like challenging, and it's like new content versus a little like knob that you're moving up in terms of the pit, because again, all you're doing in the end game is simply the pit. And I think that we can have more forms of content than simply just the pit. I always look to PvP as one of like the ultimate forms of end game content in video games in generals, but also some sort of leaderboards would be great. But I mentioned before, you have to go back into the pit, where most builds can't even do pit 100 over here. Pit 100 is kind of like the benchmark, because if you can't do pit 100, then you can't even level up your glyphs. So then you're going to get hit a wall much earlier on. Depending on what build you're playing, you could run into a wall maybe at like pit 70 or even lower. And the reason why is it's gotten much harder, and you're not going to be able to level up your glyphs because you cannot do the pit. So it's kind of a really weird thing that if you want to progress in the pit, you have to do the pit. But once you hit the wall on pit, what do you do? Is it just, oh, I have to get triple GA and get everything absolutely perfect? I don't know. It's just going to be a very, very rough end game, I think, for a lot of builds that are, again, super meta. But These are some of the things that I really want to see. So where is the leaderboards for the pit? This would be a great thing. This way players that aren't familiar with just going over to the pit like leaderboards via Helltides or, you know, browsing some other like forum or website, they're not going to know what is the best build. So once they hit that wall, they may, if they're not like super savvy with trying to find out where to actually get their power, they may just leave the game. So I think that it would be really good for the in-game to add that pit leaderboard in the game so people not only can kind of compete on the official leaderboard, but also see what other people are playing so they can maybe improve their build. I would like to see in-game trade, and what I mean by this is like some sort of like house. So like, again, it comes back to like, oh, if I hit the wall with a pit, well, I need to get better gear. Is it just like I just got to farm till I hit triple quad GA on my unique? Well, if we had an in-game trade system like a little auction house or something, this would be so much better. I think it should be instant buy, not auction house, because people just take forever. But I think that an in-game like a housing trade system would be kind of ideal to kind of let people get power in some more other way versus going to other websites and then people ask for crypto on it. It's just one of the most annoying things ever. But I think trade is very frustrating. If anyone does trade, you know what I'm talking about, when people just don't respond or whatever the case may be. And then I also feel like PvP is absolutely dead. There's no reason to do PvP in the current game state. I know for one of the seasons, they had it so like you had to do PvP for it. That's not like a reason for people to do PvP because then they just do it once and then they're done for the season journey. I think that they need to actually have rewards. Maybe you can level up something. Maybe it could be glyphs. Maybe you can get good gear in PvP. Maybe you could do wagers with gold, wagers with like, you know, items, something. Maybe you do clan battles. You can fight over certain territories, kind of like how Diablo Immortal had it, where like you can, you know, do things to actually affect the game. I feel like the PvP is just a huge area where it's just completely dead. You have two giant areas on the map where there's no point for them to really exist because no one does it. They used to actually have a lot of goblins in PvP, and that I think was the original design, is like, this is the best area to farm, so then you'd fight over the areas to farm. But a lot of times what happens with PvP is like one person like deletes the other person like one hit or whatever, then the other person's like, oh, well, he's too OP, I can't really fight him. Maybe we can have some sort of queued up system where you can fight different players. You can get some sort of leaderboard for PvP. Again, leaderboards in-game for the pit, leaderboards for maybe some PvP or clan battles. I've always said that like they need to do something with their clan feature. What's the point of, you know, a clan if you can't really do anything with your clan, right? There's no clan activities. And then also I think a loot filter definitely should exist, which we kind of talked about. But I know I'll be honest with this one. I think that this one can be easily solved. Once you're in World Tier 4, you can, whatever you need to do to crank the loot down and only just make it drop GAs. So instead of dropping like 10 items where only one is GA, maybe just drop 2 GA items. I'm not asking for less loot overall. I'm asking for less loot, but you give us quality loot in replacement of the, you know, other stuff, because there's no point for, you know, blues and yellows to exist in the game in the current game state. But anyways, that's my giant feedback for Blizzard. Hopefully they can get some of these straightened out, and hopefully we will see some adjustments, as that's the point of this video, is to give them feedback and actually have some of these things actually change. But if you want to know about the good features, I'll go ahead and link that video down below as well, because I want to give you guys both the info. I want to give you guys the good and the bad. Anyways, that's going to wrap things up. If you guys want to see the update, hopefully, to this in the future, hit subscribe, turn that bell, and you will definitely see more videos. Anyways, take care, and I'll catch you in the next video. Peace out.